Okay, today is Palm Sunday, and it had been prophesied in the Old Testament that a Messiah would come. Many of the predictions told that it would come under special circumstances, which included that Jesus would enter Jerusalem on a donkey, and he would then be received by the people, and this would be the beginning of a kind of revolution. The revolution could take more than one turn. It could take, for example, the notion that there would be a change in the theological posture of the Jewish people, becoming less legalistic and more dedicated to the concept of love and socialization of humanity. It could be the overthrow of the repressive Roman Empire, to which they belonged as subjects and not as citizens, and that the repressive nature of the Roman soldiers who kept order in that area would be overcome by forces which would be generated by this charismatic personality who would emerge from the Jewish population. A third alternative would be a politically powerful group that would emerge with Jesus as the governmental leader of this group, and then from that point on, the Jewish people would be free. It appears that some people had inquired into how this would happen and how would the charismatic personality, the Messiah, come to be recognized. Many people felt that this was personified in Jesus' past accomplishments on the period preceding the entry into Jerusalem, and that he could represent this. It made the people in the Sanhedrin, the legislative body of the Jewish people, a sort of Bronzeville arrangement in the city of Chicago, where the people who accepted a lesser position as somewhat second-class citizens felt that this was better than to have the anger of the Roman army and the Roman Empire kill thousands and thousands of Jews, as it happened. There had been previous military revolts in Jerusalem, and these had been put down in a very severe fashion, with a great number of Jewish people dying. Jesus came into Jerusalem in this tradition and was reverently received as if he were a Messiah. And this made many of the Jews who had accommodated to the circumstances under which they lived to feel that it would be better for Jesus, who was a troublemaker, to die rather than to deal with the kind of military force that would be exerted against them and destroy thousands and thousands of Jewish lives. So they felt that Jesus would have to be brought down. His acceptance and his recognition as the possible Messiah also made it urgent that he be brought down and that he die. The question then supporters of Jesus was, what should be done with the revolutionary notions that some of them had? Should the revolution simply fizzle, or should something happen that would cause it to have a dramatic impact beyond the circumstances of that entry into Jerusalem and the anger that it aroused? The answer was the death of Jesus. He accepted this, and he knew that it would happen once he was recognized as a possible Messiah. He knew that this meant sedition against the empire in Rome and the Roman legions. What has happened subsequent to that is that there would be a return of Jesus triumphantly in a forced reunion with himself and God to lead the people of Jewish tradition into power, and perhaps the acceptance of the Jewish traditions and the notion of God becoming universalized. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't know exactly which of these particular ideas was being fulfilled, except for the notion that there has in fact been a universalization of the notion of love, which was the main thrust of the Jesus philosophy and theology. That in fact we can find that it was useful in the sense that here was an idealistic system that has become useful in uniting people around a principle which hopefully will lead to the universal notion that love can be possible throughout all mankind. The history of peace treaties being respected is not a good history. While it is satisfying to our intellect and spirit for us to talk about love and inclusion, how useful are these thoughts in a world that seems selfish, exclusionist, and divisive? Is our small voice useful or necessary in this dog-eat-dog pragmatic world? I believe the answer is yes. Brought up in a Jewish household into a family and community that included a wild reformer named John the Baptist, a charismatic young man showed promise at an early age that despite being subject to an overwhelming military and political power, the Roman Empire, whose citizen army overwhelmed and maintained absolute rule over the land in which he lived, decided that it was time for a change. Now, there are many ways in which a change could take place in the society. We're talking about Jesus. The change could take place by moving from the orthodoxy and legalism of the Jewish population at that time to a theology based on love and forgiveness and reform of the religious legalistic policies that the Jews had submitted themselves to, so that rather than being totally submissive to the notion that nothing could be done on the Sabbath, you would accommodate to the fact that sometimes human needs require that things be done on the Sabbath. That rather than submit to the notion that for certain crimes people had to be stoned to death, you would modify this in terms of saying only those who are completely without sin have a right to cast a stone. So that one of the things that could be revolutionary in this particular situation might have been an attempt to change in a revolutionary way the theology of the Jewish people. Another way, of course, would be to seize power by force, which would mean overwhelming in this area the Roman army, which was a very, very difficult thing. There's a history of slave revolts in the United States where the slaves tried to overwhelm the oppressors and they failed. There's a history of Jewish revolts in the Jerusalem area where massive force was used to destroy these attempts, and a large number of them failed. The question is, we're not absolutely sure which one of these traditions, which one of these exercises, which one of these policies Jesus was trying to execute. The Passover plot describes preparation for this day by stating that Jesus and his supporters had carefully read the Old Testament. What we just read about the ass or the donkey on which Jesus rode into Jerusalem comes from the book of Isaiah, where it appears that it was predicted that the Messiah would come into Jerusalem riding on a particular donkey with certain traits. All of these apparently were verified by what we just read, that the people went and they found the donkey and Jesus came, and fortuitously, the donkey was available, fortuitously they were able to get it, fortuitously. They were able to bring it to Jesus, and he was able to ride into Jerusalem, fulfilling that prophecy. The people who made the prophecy may have had in mind a leader who would then free the Jewish people from any suppression that they were involved with. In this particular case, the suppression of the Roman rule, which made them subjects and not citizens of Rome, and subject to the the Roman laws, which favored the Roman people. The question is, was Jesus intended to be a military, political, or simply theological leader of the people at this particular point? The theory of the Passover plot is that a decision was made that the idea of a military revolution was not going to work. Charismatic as Jesus was, as frenzied as some of his followers were, the decision was made by the inner circle that this is not going to work. So the question is, what can we do with the rest of the plot? What can we do with what is possibly going to happen? And one of the things that is possibly going to happen, particularly after what we read about the way the Pharisees regarded Jesus and what they apparently were reacting to, namely that it would be better for one person to die than for the Roman legions to wipe out a large portion of the Jewish population in this revolutionary effort, if it took a military turn.